And we are live. Welcome, Jack Carr, to Born the Battle.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor to be here.
Absolutely. So, for a while, when I became host of this podcast, I didn't have many authors on the show. Then we had veterans like Dale Dye and Jeff Struker, who are veterans that are known for other things, but happen to write professionally on the side. And then we got into G. Michael Hopf, who's a self-made Amazon bestseller and in the post-apocalyptic genre. He got signed by Penguin Random House. And now, within 1 week, I'm sitting down with two authors, you and John Del Vecchio, author of The 13th Valley. And now authors are some of my favorite interviews because to me, authors, they're the origin of a lot of mediums in storytelling. A lot of times you don't have movies, movie series, TV shows, video games, YouTube clips without really good storytellers that are writers in the beginning.
Yeah, and they're all connected, and everybody kind of comes up a different way in this. I know as I was from a very young age, I was just drawn to reading because my mom was a librarian, and we were surrounded by books, so that was just a natural part of growing up. And she really instilled a love of reading in us. And at the same time, I was drawn to film. So growing up primarily in the 80s, of course, I was watching things and reading things that pertained to what I wanted to do later in life, which was serve my country in the military, specifically as a SEAL. So I tried to read books that had protagonists with backgrounds that I wanted to have in real life one day. And a lot of those back then were by guys like Tom Clancy, Nelson DeMille, David Morrell, AJ Quinnell, J.C. Pollock, Mark Olden. And these guys had protagonists typically back then with backgrounds in Vietnam, either in special forces or as SEALs or as attached to the CIA or something like that. So I just loved those kind of novels and knew that after my time in uniform, then I'd write novels that I was enjoying like that. So it's all connected. And then you get to see some of the adaptations on TV and in movies from things that you've read, or maybe you discover them through the movie and then find the book. So it's all kind of interconnected.
I appreciate the medium, but I haven't read fiction series since the Redwall series when I was in middle school.
Redwall, I don't know that one.
Yeah, it's a bunch of animals that they, I don't know. It's Brian Jacques, and it was a bunch of he converted animals into like medieval characters.
Oh, interesting.
So like, what do you call it? The badgers were like the big brutes, and the rats were the nefarious bad guys, and the mice were the heroes of the story. But that was like a series that I was actually dedicated to, but I have not been dedicated to a series since. And I've tried to get in a couple. Now, John, he wrote The 13th Valley. Did you get a chance to read that when you were younger?
I have not read that.
I'll send you the link. Apparently that was a big Vietnam book back in the 80s.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I thought there might have been a link there. And he had actually, he was with, I think the 101st as a combat correspondent.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I have a pretty solid collection of books, both fiction and non. So I'm surprised I haven't heard that one or read of that one. It sounds like, especially if it came out in the 80s, that was right. That was right in my wheelhouse.
That's what I was thinking. So Tom Clancy, what other 80s authors were influential to you?
Yeah, David Morrell for sure. So he created the character Rambo back in 1972, and he wrote a trilogy. It starts with Brotherhood of the Rose. And he wrote that in the first one in the early 80s, and then the second one is Fraternity of the Stone, and then The League of Night and Fog is the third one. But really, he took the best elements of U.S. spy fiction, which at the time was like your Ludlum, with the best of UK spy fiction, which was like Jean Le Carré. And so he combined those to really move the genre forward. And so Brotherhood of the Rose was a very significant book for me because one, I loved it so much and knew that I was going to try to write novels like that at some point in my life. And then also because there's one sentence in there. Now the two protagonists are Army Special Forces guys, but there's one sentence in there that talks about SEALs, and that really cemented. I already knew that I was going down that path, but having like the creator of Rambo have this sentence in there about SEALs really cemented me on my path. And now I've gotten to be good friends with David Morrell, and he's just an amazing guy, so kind, and he's been so wonderful to me. And he blurbed my third novel, and he's just been fantastic. So yeah, David Morrell was a huge influence. Nelson DeMille was a huge influence, especially starting with The Charm School is my first the first novel I read of his. All the Mark Olden books, all the AJ Quinnell books. So all these guys back in the 80s, they had really had an impact on me. And so for kind of, I feel like that they've kind of passed the torch on. Some of those guys aren't alive anymore, but it's my job to kind of move the genre forward as best I can.
But that's outstanding that you've gotten to meet some of them that you read about when you were a kid. And now you get to now you get to meet the author. That's got to be a cool feeling.
It's so crazy. Yeah. It's a little surreal. That you looked up to these guys for so long and, read all their stuff and all that. So everybody's just in the genre has been great to me. Everybody in the industry has been so welcoming. And I thought it was going to be the opposite. I thought coming out of the military, I'm in the SEAL teams. It's a competitive environment. We're all trying to make ourselves the best operators we can possibly be, pushing each other day in and day out, trying to earn that trident every day.
Yeah.
And I thought that, hey, when I got out, that the people that were established in publishing would kind of keep me at arm's length and like view me as competition. And the exact opposite was true. They welcomed me with open arms, and everyone's been so helpful and encouraging. And it's just a great place to be. And I think a lot of that's because, most people don't just pick one book a year. So it's not like you're kind of in competition with each other. And people that like somebody's book, as soon as they finish it, they want another book that's like that, or it's in the same genre or has a protagonist with a similar background or whatever it may be. So it's been absolutely incredible to step into that world where everybody's so encouraging.
Are a lot of them veterans as well?
Not too many at the highest levels, I would say. Yeah, I mean, there's some of them are like Nelson DeMille. He served. Stephen Hunter, he served. When you go back and look at some of those guys that were writing in the 50s and 60s and 70s, most of those guys had some sort of military background. Yeah. And I love going back and studying, and some guys that I'd read for years. Because back in the 80s, in the 90s, you couldn't just Google somebody, so whatever it said on that book jacket, that's all you knew about them. And so now you can like dive in and find out a little bit more about them just online. And you realize, oh my gosh, look what this person did during World War II, or look what they did in the Korean War. It's just, so I love doing that, going back and reading all that and finding out some of those backgrounds.
That's outstanding. Was reading these books, was that the first time that you knew that the military was going to be the next stage of your life?
No, I think I knew that from birth. My grandfather served in World War II, and he was killed off Okinawa in 1945. He was a Corsair pilot in the Marine Corps, which was the plane, for those listening, that had the gull wings that folded up to make room on aircraft carriers. And so I grew up with the silk maps that they used to give aviators back then, because if you hit the water with a paper map, it would disintegrate in the water. So they had silk maps. So I had those. I had his flag, his wings, his medals, pictures of him and his squadron. And also there was a show on TV called Black Sheep Squadron starring Robert Conrad. And of course it was about Pappy Boynton, and kind of a fictionalized version of some of the adventers that they had there in the Pacific. And I loved watching that with my dad, because it was he never met his dad, because he was away when he was born when his father was away in World War II.
Sure. And
so that was kind of our connection to him, was watching Black Sheep Squadron. And it was great. I got to meet Pappy Boynton before he passed away in the 80s.
No way.
And got to meet Robert Conrad, who played him as well. So so that was pretty cool for a young kid. So I was just drawn to it, I think, because of that connection to my grandfather. So I always knew I was going to serve. I just didn't know quite what that was until, and here's once again is the influence of popular culture, is I saw an old black and white movie called The Frogmen. And I saw these guys swimming up over the beach and blowing up obstacles in advance of the conventional force landings, and asked my dad, hey, who are these guys? And he said, those are frogmen, because that was the name of the movie. And I said, well, who are these guys? What's it all about? And he said, go ask your mother. And my mom, being a librarian, we went down to the local library and started doing research. And that's the early 80s. So there's hardly anything written about SEALs back then. There's, a couple of mentions in a magazine article or newspaper article or two, a couple of chapters in books. There was actually some beta
Betacam?
Betamax videos that talked about Vietnam, and had some cool footage from Vietnam. And so I just devoured all of it. And back then you could almost read everything written about SEALs, because there wasn't that much. Obviously you couldn't possibly do that today with the internet. You could just spend the rest of your life going down those rabbit holes. But back then you could read all of it. And
then still be starving for more.
Yeah, exactly. And so, so my takeaway from that research with my mom was that I read that these guys were some of the toughest special operators in the world, and that the training was some of the toughest ever devised by a modern military. So, from a very early age, they had me. I think I was 7 years old when I did that research. So, ever since then, I just kept my eye on that goal of getting to BUD/S, getting through BUD/S, and getting to my SEAL team. And we thought, once we got to our SEAL teams, that we'd zip off around the world doing all sorts of secret missions. And truth be told, we cross that quarter deck and they hand you a mop and a broom and, say, hey, new guy, go clean the bathroom. But we really didn't get to do, most of us anyway, didn't get to do what we thought we were coming in to do until after September 11th. And after that, then it was kind of off to the races.
Everything changed. 20 years in the Navy, how much of it was spent in SEAL teams?
Yeah, all of it. I mean, boot camp, obviously you show up and, you're doing your boot camp stuff. And then right from there, back when I came in, you had to go to an A school first. So get your MOS somewhere. So I went to Intel school at Dam Neck, Virginia. And then, a few weeks after that, you're at BUD/S. So, so within that first year, within that first 6 months or so, or maybe 7, 8, whatever it was, I was at BUD/S. And then the rest of the time is in Naval Special Warfare up until I got out.
Very cool. Very cool. Now you were a Mustang, right?
That's right.
You started out as a sniper, all the way to commanding special operations task units out in Iraq. Now, did you spend some time out in Africa as well? Because it says in your book, doing some research, you spent some time out in Mozambique. Did you spend time down there as well? Because on my last deployment, one of my public affairs Marines that I served with when we were attached to Special Purpose MAGTFs, he went down there to get some footage of weapons training and whatnot when we were in Sigonella. Anti-poaching is a mission that not many people are familiar with. Is that something that you were a part of during your time?
Not during my time in the military. I went there after.
Okay.
So I did go to Mali while I was in the military to do some training down there. And before that, I'd been to Kenya and to Egypt and to Morocco. But after I got out in the summer of 2016, and I was just putting the final touches on my first novel, The Terminal List. Then didn't have an agent, didn't even know I needed one, didn't have a publishing deal or anything like that. But just writing. And I always knew I was going to write a second one because of the John Grisham story where he wrote A Time to Kill first, and he couldn't give that novel away. But instead of quitting, he continued to write, and he wrote a little novel called The Firm that then took off. There's a movie with Tom Cruise, of course, and then they go back and republish A Time to Kill, which I think is his to me, I think it's his best work, or some of his best work anyway. So I always knew that no matter what happened with that first one, if I couldn't get anyone to even look at it, I was going to write that second one. So
I always told producers the same thing, or writers that wanted to write for a TV series or films, or had an idea for a series, like give them the one that you're not in, that's not your heart in on all of it, because they're going to change it, and then have them come back. Is that what you were kind of talking about?
No, it was more of along the lines of, hey, if I can't even get someone to look at this thing, kind of like John Grisham with his first book, then I was always going to write a second one, and because that's the one that might take off. And if the second one didn't take off, then I was going to reevaluate my life choices.
Gotcha.
I was always going to write that second one. So as soon as I got out, I was really on a plane to Mozambique to do that research for the second novel, because there's some things you can only get by putting boots on the ground. So I'm out there for that. And then before I'd finished the second one, I went back, and this time went to South Africa and trained up an anti-poaching unit down there that was switching over to M4s and Glocks. So I have a little bit of experience with those weapon systems. So,
were you a contractor at that point?
No, I just went over and volunteered my time to go over and help train up this anti-poaching unit over there. So went over there and did that, and learned so much from those guys, because a lot of them had kind of caught the tail end of the bush wars. Well, first they'd grown up hunting and tracking for food, and then they caught the tail end of the bush war. So then they turned that tracking of animals into tracking humans, tactical tracking. And then they came back from that, and the government was like, wow, we have a lot of people coming back from these bush wars that what are they going to do now? Oh, I know, we can bring them into the National Police Force and kind of turn them into their version of a CSI. So they took this tracking of animals, this tracking of humans, and then applied it to tracking in an urban environment, and not necessarily, looking at drops of blood or something like that, but getting inside the mind of the perpetrator and trying to figure out what his next move was going to be. And then a lot of they aged out of that. So a lot of the people that I was working with were older and at this anti-poaching unit, but they brought all that experience with them. And in the case of where I was in South Africa, their job was to protect some of the last rhino on Earth. So I learned a ton from them. I got to incorporate that into both my second novel and the third one as well.
That's outstanding. While you were in, give me either a best friend or your greatest mentor.
Well, mentor-wise, there was a commanding officer that I served under at one of my SEAL teams, and he had spent the first year after September 11th deployed to Afghanistan. So we hadn't had really sustained combat operations since Vietnam. We had flashpoints at, say, Desert One, at Grenada, at Panama, Mogadishu, but we hadn't been in sustained combat operations for quite some time. Yeah. So he spent that first year over there, and he brought these certain lessons back to us, and really made us memorize these 4 battlefield expectations that he had, and they apply on the battlefield, they apply in life, and he just the way he cared and passed those lessons on, lessons that he learned in blood downrange onto the rest of us, certainly made an impression. I haven't forgotten it, and they actually worked their way into my fiction. I italicized them and put them into my fiction as the protagonist is thinking through different problem sets in the novels. So he's the one that would jump out to me with that question.
What are the 4 pillars? What are the 4 lessons?
Yeah, so he said, always improve your fighting position, exploit all technical and tactical advantages, push SA, and of course everybody listening to this is probably military, situational awareness, both up and down the chain of command. And then that 4th one, and the most important one, I think, is in the absence of orders or direction on the battlefield, take charge and lead. So those ones were, if you throw out every manual you've ever read and you take a breath and think about those in a chaotic situation, they'll point you in the right direction.
Outstanding. I heard on your Rogan interview that when many of your fellow SEAL members were watching shows or gaming, you were always reading, analyzing storytellers, which I related to because that's what I did. That's what I was doing with storytelling and shows, features, just overall content creators. It wasn't just mindless fun or relaxation. It was a kind of a studying. Is that kind of what you were doing with your books?
Yeah, so I've always been a reader. And even before I joined the military, I was always studying warfare and insurgencies and counterinsurgencies, because I knew where I was going. I didn't wake up one morning and then just decide to be a SEAL. I'd been preparing for it my whole life. So I was just building on that foundation. And I always thought it was my duty to do that, to put in the time, energy, and effort into that study to make myself the best operator, the best leader that I could possibly be downrange. So even when I was downrange, I was always studying after action reports from other things going on in theater. I'm still reading, nonfiction books out there, and then throwing in every now and again a little fiction as well. But I very rarely watched a movie, maybe once or twice during those deployments, and never played a video game. So all my time if we had downtime, it was spent studying, doing things that were gonna make me better and more effective and more efficient on the battlefield. So that's always been a part of it. And really all that study, both before the military, during my time in, and continues today, that coupled with all that fiction that I read growing up as well, like they combine at the right time and place with my experiences downrange in Iraq and Afghanistan. And all those 3 things, the experience downrange, the feelings and emotions behind those, plus the reading of the fiction and the study, the nonfiction, all combine at the right time and place to make its way into my novels as I transitioned from the military. So I didn't really plan it like that. It was just a very natural course that I took, but it ended up working out in a way that it couldn't really have been planned better.
Interesting. Very interesting. You talk about getting out in 2016 and that you wanted to be a writer since you were a kid and you've done all the studying. Was there ever the thought of a backup plan, or if it didn't work out, that there would be another profession, or was it, hey, I have a retirement, I can live austerely and make this work?
No. So it's always good to have contingency plans,
Sure.
of course. But of course, coming from the military, you need that. None of them were very appealing. I did have backup plans, of course, just because it's important to have that, I think. But at the same time, I didn't really entertain them seriously. It was just kind of like nice to haves. I know there are these different paths I can take, but what do I want to do? Where am I going to put my time, energy, and effort right now? Where am I going to devote my bandwidth? Because I only have a certain amount of it. So where am I going to put that? And for me, I'm going to put it into the book, make it the best book I can possibly make it, and before I send it off to New York, so to a publishing house. So yeah, that was really, all that other stuff never really entered my mind because same thing with SEAL training. And it's kind of one of my life mantras is, never pay attention to the odds, because there were certainly a lot of people that loved to tell me how hard SEAL training was before I went in, and how many people fail out, or how hard that is. Like, people love to tell you how hard things are to do. Same thing with publishing. I got the same looks when I told people I wanted to be an author that I got when I told people I wanted to be a SEAL. They look at you like you're going to grow out of it one day. They kind of pat you on the head like, that's nice. Kind of like telling people you're going to be an astronaut when you're a kid. Same thing. Like, oh, that's nice. That's cute. And I didn't pay attention to any of that stuff because I didn't worry about the odds of making it through SEAL training. I just knew it was hard. That's why I was going there. And I knew that I had to prepare myself if I wanted to make it through the best I possibly could. So I thought, well, what am I going to do? Well, I can work out. I can climb ropes. I can do distance running. I could do pull-ups. I can do sit-ups. I can do all these things that I see people doing in these videos. And what else can I do? I can study. I can read these books on warfare and terrorism and insurgencies. And what else can I do? I can push myself, not just in workouts, but putting on a backpack, going into the backcountry, putting myself in uncomfortable situations, getting out on the snowshoes and cross-country skis and backcountry, and doing all those sorts of things that are difficult in order to prepare myself for SEAL training. And same thing with writing. It's people, you can worry about the odds of getting published by a New York publishing house, the odds of becoming a New York Times bestselling author. You can worry about those things, but you know what? That's taking up bandwidth, and where it should be focused is on where you want to go, whether it's writing or whatever else it's going to be. But then making whatever that product is, or building out whatever the business is, spend that time there instead of just worrying about those odds. Because you can worry yourself, or you can study how to do something forever and never actually take that first step and actually doing it. So people talk to me about books on writing, and I read a couple, but most of them weren't like how-to books. They're more the Stephen Pressfield's The Art of the War of Art, Turning Pro, Do the Work, those things that really talk about just sitting down and doing it. I mean, there's a reason that the Nike motto, "Just do it," is still around and people remember it because it is so true. That's the one thing you can't get away from. If you're going to do something, you can think about it all day long, but eventually you have to sit down and do it.
You have a unique way of researching your books. You actually go to the places that you're talking about.
That's right.
What do you learn? What are you looking for when you actually go there? Is it culture? Is it terrain? Is it what are some of the things that you focus on?
Yeah, it's all of those things. And a lot of it you don't even know until you go there. So when I went to Mozambique, I had a whole list of things that I wanted to come back with information. A lot of it was language, actually. A lot of the things were like different phrases and how to say them in these different languages over there. And I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to incorporate them, or how many I was going to incorporate, but I had about a page, and there's a lot of different languages in Mozambique. So I had that, and I wanted to know what the dirt was like, the rocks are like, the leaves were like, what's it like in the winter there? I got to talk to them about that. Is it a rainy season? How do things change during those times? So I had a lot of questions when I was over there, but I got a lot that I didn't even know that I was going to get.
Politics?
There was some politics, of course. The plane that I flew in on to this remote backcountry hunting camp, the boots that my professional hunter was wearing, the backgrounds of my trackers, that sort of thing. So there's a ton you get that I wouldn't have even known to research without going there and experiencing it and living it. So that's invaluable for me, especially starting out, because really the power of these books is that I take the emotions and feelings behind certain experiences downrange and I apply them to a completely fictional narrative. Well, same thing with that research. I take that research and I apply it. It's real, but I apply it to a completely fictional narrative. So the sights, the sounds, the smells, what the dirt feels like, what it looks like, all those sorts of things, little stories that you can incorporate, that you hear from somebody that's down there, and you incorporate it into a character in the novel. So those sorts of things are so important for me anyway. And then I went to Siberia, well, just south of Siberia, Kamchatka Peninsula. And 'cause I always wanted to go there.
I think I saw that on a Risk board.
There you go. That's right. So went over there because I knew I had to go there because it was such an important part of the third novel of Savage Son. And I just needed to put boots on the ground. And it was crazy flying in there because most of the year you have to fly. So let's say you're flying from the West Coast of the United States. Well, first you fly to the East Coast, then you fly to Germany or the UK, then you fly to Moscow, then you fly all the way across Siberia to get almost all the way back to the West Coast of the United States.
Oh my gosh,
it's not that far away from Alaska. Wow. So, but for 1 month out of the year, you can fly from Anchorage, and it's one flight a week. So you're either going there for 7 days, 14 days, whatever. So so I went there for just a week, and it was incredible. And I'm learning about all the mosquitoes over there, crazy. I got some incredible. I worked some experiences over there into that third novel that I think really brings it to life.
Very good, very good. You talked about breaking into the writing industry without an agent. How did you do that? Was there a connection? Was it in a developed audience? What got you to the next step to actually be noticed by a publisher?
Yeah, certainly not a developed audience because I didn't have Facebook, didn't have Instagram, didn't have Twitter, never wanted any of those things while I was in.
I respect that.
Yeah, so it didn't work. So and I'm really glad that it didn't happen. Just like I guess it could happen the opposite way, where somehow for some reason you have an audience on maybe social media or something, and then because you have someone you can market something towards, then New York publishing house says, "Oh, let's do something with this guy." So that was not the case. I had no accounts, no following, no one knew anything about me, and I really liked that it happened this way because I sent the book to New York, and I got very lucky because I didn't study how to do this at all. Which had I might have found out that you're supposed to get an agent, and that's the usual path. But luckily, I did not know that, so I didn't get one. And instead, I sent my manuscript directly to New York because I had the door cracked open for me. And someone sat next to Brad Thor at an event, and it was a buddy of mine from the SEAL teams. And he'd helped Brad out with a couple books after that. And as I started to get ready to get out, he called me and said, "Hey, I heard you're writing a book." And I said, "Yep." And he said, "Well, would you like to talk to Brad Thor?" And I said, "Well, will he talk to me? I'd love that. That'd be amazing." And so set up a time to talk, and ended up talking to him for like 45 minutes or so. And he was amazing, great, just incredible guy. And he said, "You know what? Hey, he was kind of like a job interview. He wanted to know like why I wanted to write, why I wanted to be an author, all those things." And I told him all the things I just told you now in this conversation about wanting to do it since I grew up and loving these authors and all the rest of it. And he said, all right, stop talking. He's like, "I've never done this to anyone before, but your friend told me some of the things that you did in the SEAL teams. And as a thank you for that, if you write a book, I'll let New York know it's coming. I'll let my publisher know it's coming."
Wow.
I can't guarantee they'll open the package. Can't guarantee they'll read one word. Definitely can't guarantee they'll like it. But I can at least let them know that it's coming. And he's like, "Don't call me until it's done. Yeah. I'm not going to give you any more advice. I'm not going to read anything. I'm not going to give you feedback. None of that stuff. Just when you're done, give me a call. I'll let them know it's coming." And he thought that that I wouldn't finish. Because authors get this all the time.
I did my good deed for the day.
Yeah, exactly. And then he also thought that if I did finish and send it to New York, that they'd read one word and be like, what do you want me to tell this guy? Just give him some advice. Just say, keep going, don't quit. Instead, Emily Bessler, his editor publisher, and Vince Flynn, when he was alive, his editor publisher, read it, loved it, and wanted to publish it. So So a couple of things there that stand out to me is that had I not had my friend in the SEAL teams that got out, well, I got very lucky that he sat next to Brad Thor at this dinner. But at the same time, he has to risk his reputation, his capital by introducing me, by feeling comfortable enough to recommend me to Brad Thor. And had I done maybe some different things in the SEAL teams or whatever, he wouldn't have felt comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
So you have to have that foundation. You have to have that, that reputation, that character, of course, established. You have to do those. You have to build that foundation. And so I got very lucky that he sat next to Brad, that he felt comfortable enough to recommend that we get on the phone and talk to one another. And I just feel very fortunate all the way around. But
absolutely,
point being, you have to do all those things, all that work along the way to build the foundation, no matter where you want to go.
Make sure you're just a good guy. Just make sure you're just be cool.
Yeah, nothing about it is about people talk about networking, and I don't. It's just a weird thing to me. So I never intentionally, quote unquote, networked. I was just me, just put in the work in the teams, tried to be as good a leader as I could possibly be, best operator I could possibly be. And then same thing with the books. So, it's almost that simple. I think when people try to network or try to do it, it's a weird thing, and you can notice it, and it's very strange.
Yes.
And I feel bad saying that, because some people maybe just aren't personable, and might have a tough time, and so they have to put in I don't know. It's a strange thing. I don't know.
There's effort. You see an effort there sometimes.
Yeah. I don't put any effort into that.
It was more about karma networking.
Yeah, I guess it's just about doing the best you can at whatever you're going to do, and that's
gotcha.
it. Yeah. So for me, I didn't intentionally do any sort of networking whatsoever.
Gotcha. Very good. How long did it take to write that first book? Well, and what was the process like?
Yeah. So the first book in general can take you as long as you want it to take, because you have no deadlines. So you can get it as good as you can possibly get it. So this is a good and a bad thing, in that you can always make something better. So there are probably some outstanding novels. Some of the best novels ever written are probably still sitting in somebody's drawer, maybe on someone's hard drive, something like that, because they think that's not quite good enough yet. Like, just going to spend a little more time with it. So when I sat down, I thought, I'm going to get this as good as I can get it. And I'm not going to spend 10 years making it 1% better. I'm going to get it to that point where I think it's as good as I can get it without the eyes of a New York publishing editor. And then I'm sending it. So, and then I thought, once it got there, because it never occurred to me that this might not work out, right? Like, it never occurred to me that I might not make it through buds and all that. Never crossed my mind that it wouldn't go right to Simon & Schuster, that they wouldn't want to publish it right away, that it wouldn't get picked up for a series by an A-list star. Like, I just assumed all these things were going to happen, because that was
just you took if you believe it, you will achieve it approach.
I guess I didn't really think of it in those terms either. I just kind of thought, this is what I'm doing. Like, I'm in this sprint, and I don't have time to think about it not happening. So point being, that first one took about 1.5 years. And I got it to that point where I was like, okay, it's about as good as I can get it. Then I sent it off to probably that first one. Now I send it out to about 4 people, but that first one, I think I sent out to about 20 people to just get a little feedback. And I was like, okay, I don't remember if it was exactly 20, it might've been 10 or 15 or something, but I was like, okay, if one of them says something, they don't like something, then I'm going to discard it. 2 of them, I'm going to take one quick little look and then probably toss out. 3 of them, same thing. 4, same thing. 5 out of 20 say the same thing. I'm going to really look at that part and maybe make some changes. So I looked at it. So I didn't want to just kind of go, someone who didn't like this, okay, I'm going to change it. Someone doesn't like this, I'm going to change it. And just because that didn't make sense to me. But if a few people, didn't like one thing, then I was going to take a look at it. And so there was a couple minor things that I changed, and then sent it off to New York, put it in the mail, and off it went. And I thought,
are you married? Are you married?
Yep.
Is your wife one of those 20?
She did read it, yes, but she was not one of the ones that. So
she's not one of the 20, but your wife did read it.
She does, yeah, exactly.
My wife will not. She writes, and she does not let me read a page. Not a page.
Nice. That's funny.
Yeah, not a page.
That's hilarious. That's probably best. Actually. I want to keep those things separate. I might recommend that.
Very good.
But yeah, so I sent it off to New York, and I was like, if if Emily Bessler reads this and decides that she wants to put in exploding robots from outer space, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put exploding robots from outer space in here.
Oh, wow.
And I kind of took that approach to it. And I was so surprised that she hardly wanted to change anything. She had 3 questions. One was like, hey, would you really say this here? Would you really do this here? And one other thing I can't remember anymore, but they were so minor. And I couldn't believe it. And I don't think I was really nervous up until that point, because I was like, oh, she's going to make it great. And then there's just these 3 minor little questions that weren't even changes. They were just questions and, morph of a couple of sentences to fall more in line with the character and the theme of the novel. But so it didn't really change much. And that's it's continued to be that way through these the next few as well. So
are you still juggling editing one book while writing another?
Yeah.
To me, crazy. that seems tough, because that's like editing 2 projects, two films at the same time.
Yeah, now there's a third thing going on. So now there's the scripts for the Amazon series. So you have those going also at the same time. So there's a lot to juggle.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Sincerely appreciate it. And what's crazy about that is that I pictured Chris Pratt in the role as I was writing, which is an odd person to...
I was going to ask you, how did you get his attention?
Well, I stumbled into it. And as I was writing, it was weird because you wouldn't necessarily, especially back then. So I was writing this in, I might mess up a date by a year or two, because
sure.
Things are a little hazy right now because I'm in the middle of all these edits. But let's say, I think December 2014, I think maybe I started down the path. Certainly during my last year in the military.
Okay.
I was working on it, and he's in Parks and Rec at the time, I think, or just finishing that maybe. And so he wasn't known as an action star, wasn't known, for serious drama type stuff. But I always thought of, hey,
so this was before Jurassic Park?
This is before Jurassic Park, before Guardians of the Galaxy. Wow. He had a small role in Zero Dark 30. And I think that was kind of his first serious role, very small role. Yeah. But I was like, you know what? Tom Hanks in the 80s, we had bosom buddies. We had The Burbs. You had, Turner and Hooch. You had all these, comedies. And then all of a sudden he takes a risk with Philadelphia in the early 90s. And then from then on, he can write his own ticket. And I was kind of thinking, who is this generation's, guy like that? Because I need this character to be likable, because he is going to do some things that the audience is going to need to forgive him for. The audience is going to have to want him to succeed because he's a likable person. And I was like, man, Chris Pratt is a likable guy. He is awesome. He is funny. And I know he'd done the Zero Dark 30 thing. So in my mind, I was just like, oh, that would be a great guy to do this. And, I didn't think much more of it than that. Because also, if you read some of these books, they say, don't picture somebody playing your character as you're writing. But as a child of the 80s, that was next to impossible. So sure. I pictured Chris Pratt. And then right before the book came out, years later, so this is now 3 years later, at least 2.5 years later, whatever, I get a call out of the blue from an old buddy of mine from the SEAL teams, and I hadn't talked to him for years. And he's like, hey, how's it going? And we started talking, and he said, hey, I heard you wrote a book. And I said, yeah, it's coming out in a few months, and I can send you an early copy called a galley. I can send one of those out to you. And he's like, well, hey, I always wanted to call you and say thank you for what you did for me in the SEAL teams. And I was kind of thinking, what did I do? And he said, sure. The only person that sat me down in your office as I was getting ready to get out and talk to me about transition. You introduced me to people in the private sector. You're the only person that took time out to do that for me. And I was like, oh, hey, no problem.
Is he out in the private sector now? Who is it?
Yep, absolutely. So his name's Jared Shaw. I'm allowed to say his name now.
There you go.
He likes to stay. He likes to keep a low profile, but I'm talking him out of the shadows. And he's like, hey, I'd like to give this book to a friend of mine. Do you mind? I'm like, no, I'll send you 2, one for you, one for your friend. And I'm like, hey, who is it, by the way? And he said, Chris Pratt. I was like, oh, interesting.
That's crazy.
So, yeah. So he gave it to Chris, and Chris read it on a flight to London for some of the Jurassic Park things. And next thing you know, a week or so later, I'm getting the call that says he wants to option it for a film or a series. So off we went to the races.
Wow. Like personally, he optioned it?
Yep, exactly.
Personally. So that's cool.
Yeah. Crazy. And I pictured Anton Fuqua directing it, who did Tears of the Sun, did Equalizer, did Magnificent Seven, got an Academy Award for Training Day. and he wanted it too, at the same time. And so it ended up, they're collaborating together on it. So Anton Fuqua was directing and Chris Pratt is starring, and we have a great team of writers working on the scripts, and I'm an advisor on those. So I get to see them and give my take my red pen out and jump on calls and do the rest of it. So I'm learning a ton about screenwriting, and the scripts are fantastic.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. When a writer signs over a book for a series or movies, the level of participation seems to be negotiated, right? Like some just sign it over and say have fun. Some are involved as advisors, but they're not the end all be all decision maker, like George R.R. Martin was with Game of Thrones.
Right.
And my wife was complaining about the writing in 50 Shades of Grey. Okay, take that for what it is. But I guess in that contract, the writer insisted that the script was exactly to be the same wording as the book.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So I would not have done that.
Is there a concession for cold hard cash? Is there a balance there? What did you prefer?
Yeah. So I was not negotiating from a position of strength.
Sure.
With one novel that's not even out yet. So, no platform, zero followers on anything. So complete unknown.
It's your first go.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't really have much to say about any of that sort of thing. But in my mind, just having studied this for so long and seeing so many different books turn into movies, and notice what I liked, what I didn't like about that, things that worked, things that didn't. Like I've been a student of that my whole life as well. So so I was not married to keeping the book exactly the same for film. It's a different medium, and therefore it needs to be told in a different way. So I completely understand that, and I wouldn't want it to be to the letter of the book, because you're telling the story totally different. So, but point being, if you have a body of work over years, like let's say you're a Daniel Silva with a Gabriel Allon series, which is that series is 20 books long, I think now. He had 3 books previous to that with different characters. But if you have a body of work like that, now you're negotiating from a position of strength, because you're selling an entire universe to Hollywood.
Are all your books in one universe? Are you building a universe with shared canon history? Okay.
Yeah, gotcha. Exactly. But at the time, there was nothing.
There was the one book.
Yeah, there was one book, and it hadn't even been published yet. So
that's incredible. You got an option for a show before the book even got published. That's amazing.
Yeah. So you could hold on, but for me, I'm like, you know what? The exact person that I wanted to star in this wants to option it. The exact director that I wanted to direct it wants it.
That's serendipity. That's karma.
Go with it.
Yeah. Go with it. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm not going to be greedy here. So anyway, that's kind of, so it can work out a different. So I think every deal is different, I would think. So, but I'm not positive, but I think that every deal is different. And if you have this body of work, if you have dedicated readership already, then you can you're negotiating from a position of strength at that point.
You're a little more closely aligned, a little more close to home on that one.
Well, you get to say, hey, I'm not going to sell you this universe unless I am the writer, I am the this, I am the that. You do this, you can add some things. For me, there was none of that. I'm just like, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Very good, very good. Talk to me about writing as a profession. I'm sure, and because I'm sure someone clicked on this episode because it said author. The writing profession, much like music, has changed drastically within the past decade due to digital media. For the veterans that are getting out now and want to start writing as a profession, what would your advice be to them?
Yeah, first, not to worry about anything at the periphery. So, meaning you have to have that product, so it's not just writing; it's anything, and that has to be good. It has to be as good as you can make it. So before worrying about if you're going to get published, if you should self-publish, if you should build up an audience, how you're going to market, you know what, that is all those 4 things I just mentioned. And I'm sure there's like 10, 15, 20 other things you could be worrying about. That time was not spent making the product as good as it could possibly be. So before you worry about any of that, get the best book you possibly can. So that would be my advice.
Focus on the content.
Focus on that book. Yeah, exactly. You have to focus on that book. You have to get that thing as good as you can possibly get it. Now you can take a breath. And during that time that you're writing, things are probably, changing as you've been writing that. So there'll be things out there that are available to you that weren't available 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Certainly not available 20 years ago. Definitely not available 30 years ago. In that before, let's say in the 70s, 80s, mid 90s, you had to depend on your publisher to do most everything.
Yeah.
You had to depend on that publicist. And guess what? You're not the only author that Simon & Schuster has. And they have to pay those bills. Just like with movies, there are a few movies out there, like the Avengers makes all the money for all those other movies that don't make money. And that's kind of how publishing works as well. There's a few books at the top that make the money for everybody else, and allow those other books to really be published. So it's very rare for a book to make back, to make money on a book. And luckily mine did right away. So mine was kind of an anomaly. And most people just think of what really are outliers, like Game of Thrones, like 50 Shades of Grey, like Twilight. So those types of things, those are the outliers, but those are the ones that people are like, oh, that's the norm. That's not the norm.
No, that's like
those all books paid for everyone else's.
That's like the half of the 1% that you see.
Exactly. But all that money that those bring in, those pay for all those other books out there that didn't make back their money. So same things with movies.
The ones they're taking a chance on.
Yeah, exactly. So point being, so after you have that book as good as you can possibly get it, that's the time to then take a breath and figure out those next steps. I think if you tried, and this is just me, right? So it could be different for everybody else, but but if you're spending time trying to build up an audience or trying to do all these other things, or worried about all these other things, I don't think that's time well spent, because that book has got to be the best it can be. So that would be my advice, to do that, and then take advantage of some of these things that weren't available to authors out there 30 years ago. So all that marketing, guess what you can do? You can build your own platform. If CNN or Fox or whatever is not having you on one of their shows, guess what you can do? You can build your own. You can do a podcast. You can have a social media presence. And what's important about those things, I think, is to provide something of value. So before I post anything, before I do anything like that, I think, hey, am I going to waste somebody's time by posting this? I want to add value to someone's day with everything that I do. And because if you're doing that, then when it comes time for that book to come out, guess what? You've added a year of value to someone else's life, based off, whatever it is, your study, your perspective, your experience, whatever that may be. And so when the time comes for your book to come out, well, there you go. There's your return.
That makes logical sense, because if you can say, hey, in 30 seconds, this guy can make me laugh or make me think deep or whatever, imagine what he did with a year's worth of effort into something.
Yeah. And it's really about building trust with an audience. So it's really about building that relationship with an audience. And you can do that today. You couldn't have done that in 1995 and 1985 and 1975. But you know what? You can do it today. But you can also screw it up today. You can do the exact opposite. You can break that trust. You can post stupid things that aren't adding value to someone's day. And if you're not adding value to someone's day, guess what? Why would they follow you? Why would they buy your next book? Why would they continue to engage with you if you're being a negative input in their life? So for me, that's important. And other people might have different views on it, but that's my take.
Yeah, no, I definitely, it makes logical sense to me. I think it's hilarious that you have a series called Negative Reviews. Because on Born the Battle, we still respond on air to any reviews on Apple Podcasts, good or bad. And you say, don't spend much time on them, but it's human nature, which is completely true. Is there a good review or a bad review that sticks out to you as of like today? Or you can just show an example of each, either one.
Hilarious. So I was about to post one today, actually, and I was just kind of rethinking it because I have a lot to do. So I might hold off till next week. Wow. I did a recording the other day of just two, because I was kind of scrolling through whatever, and I saw two new ones, and I'm like, oh, these are fantastic, and pulled them out, and one was just someone saying that he loved the book, it was awesome, but he didn't like the gear, so 1 star.
Wow, that's what the gear I would use. 1 star.
Yeah, no, he even said he has most of the gear. So, and then
that's hilarious.
And then another person was talking about how they did not like that there were a lot of veterans getting into quote unquote the writing game based on their celebrity status. And I was like, well, we did not, as we just talked about in this conversation,
you didn't have that.
Not have anything. No.
Yeah.
So I had 0. So it was all based on the book.
On the writing.
Yeah. So he did not like that. He had some funny, anyway, you kind of got to laugh at it. And then there's some where, you get the 1 star because it arrived a day late from Amazon and they give you 1 star. You're like, oh, bro, come on.
Amazon, help me out here.
It's not helping. Yeah. Like the cover was ripped or it arrived without a cover from like Barnes and Noble. And you're like, oh, and you get a 1 star.
Things that you can't control.
Yeah. And every author gets those. Every single author gets things like that. So there's good and bad to all this, right? So the bad part is that crazy people, there are no barriers. And like, let's say in 1985, if someone wrote a crazy letter to a magazine or a newspaper, letter to the editor, guess what? It's to the editor. So the editor reads it and it's like, wow, this person is crazy. We're not putting this. We're not doing this. There was a barrier there. But at the same time, you couldn't engage with that audience.
I think it's a great way to engage with your audience, what you're doing, or responding to reviews.
Yeah. And that was just kind of a fun kind of thing to do because I like to turn negatives into positives as best I can. And so anyway, it's kind of a fun way to do it. And but I appreciate, every review it's great, because
absolutely. There's a connection there. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. Jack, what's one thing that you learned in service that you carry with you today?
Oh, geez. One thing that I learned in service.
And I know you probably learned many things, but if you were to pick one out.
Yeah, I don't know where I came to this realization. I don't know if it was I didn't just wake up with it one day, but I think I always knew it and always, it was always a part of me, but I didn't really put words to it till much later, probably during my last 2 deployments. But it's all about building trust, not just building trust with the guys below you in the chain of command and above you in the chain of command, and taking every opportunity, every engagement, every interaction is an opportunity to build that trust. So whether you're passing somebody in the hallway, or you're giving a brief, or the guys are going out to run the obstacle course, or you're going to the range, or whatever, like all of these are opportunities to engage and build trust. And much like we just talked about, you can also lose that trust if you mess it up. Like if you get out there and you're doing a log PT, or you're running, doing some sort of a team thing, whatever, you're not pulling your weight, or hey, guess what? You're losing some credibility right there. So what do you have to do? You got to be in shape. You got to be there out front. And if you're not the fastest, well, you got to be up there near the top. If you're not, if you're not first, same thing on the range, especially as a leader, if you're not the best shot out there, well, you better be up there near the top.
Sure.
The guys need to be looking at you as something that they aspire to be one day. But then for me, it was important for the guys to also know that I wanted them to be better than I was. I wanted them to be able to do it better than I did it for them. And that means sharing some of the things that you could do better. So sharing successes, sharing failures, pushing that credit down to the guys for anything, and then taking responsibility for the failures. So all those things, but it comes back to trust. And same thing up the chain of command. Every interaction with those above you, they have to look at you and be like, okay, I don't need to worry about this guy because of an interaction they had, because of a brief, because of whatever it is. And they're going to focus their attention maybe on someone that needs it. And they're going to give you that freedom of maneuver because they trust you. So it's really about building trust. And same thing today. It's about building trust with that audience, trust with that readership. So that's, that'd be and I don't think if I learned it in service or was just a part of upbringing but being able to articulate it as giving it the credit, giving it the credence, giving it that attention, and just identifying, the trust is the most important part of leadership. And it's the most important part of building a brand, no matter what it is that trust with the people that are buying your product, that are engaging with you.
Outstanding. Is there a veteran nonprofit or individual who you've worked with or had experience with who you'd like to mention?
Yeah, so there's so many, I mean, there's so many foundations out there, organizations out there
Yes.
that are doing work with veterans. It's almost overwhelming. So the ones I to support are ones that I have touch points with. Either they did, I was involved with them personally, or a dear friend of mine was involved with them personally, or they helped a friend of mine or something like that. Yeah. So it can't just be that they have a good website and that's all the thought that I gave to it type thing. So there has to be a personal touch point. So Rescue 22 is an amazing one, started by a friend of mine from the K9 program in the SEAL teams, and they provide fully trained service and support dogs to veterans dealing with the emotional and physical trauma of the battlefield. So people dealing with PTSD, dealing with TBI, people missing arms and legs, all that. Yeah. They do some amazing work with these dogs, and it's absolutely incredible. So Rescue 22 is definitely one that is at the top of my list. But there's some other great ones out there as well. And actually on my website, if people click on the gear portion of my website, there's some merchandise there, and 100% of those proceeds go to the veteran focused organizations that are listed.
Did you just say 100%?
Yep, all of it. I wanted that to be kind of my way to give back, and I always felt a little strange about just throwing a T-shirt up there. You know what I mean? As I started down this path and started to, get some sort of a following or whatever, I thought, I want to do something a little different here. And so 100% of all the proceeds go to those veteran focused organizations. And I try to support veteran with the merch, veteran businesses as much as I can. I mean, sometimes you can't, but as much as I can, like Direct Action USA, they make these awesome bookmarks that have these 5.56 rounds on them. And so I have that in there. I have my buddy Eli Crane from Bottle Breacher that has these bottle openers made out of 50 cal rounds and grenades and all that. So I have that stuff on there, and then there's hats and T-shirts and all the rest of it. So, but yeah, all the proceeds go to veteran focused organizations, and they're listed on the site there. And each one of those is one that I have a personal touch point with.
Very good, very good. We've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything else, Jack, that I missed or didn't ask that you think is important to share?
I mean, since this is, the audience is who I think it is. For veterans, I would say that, don't let anyone discourage you as you're getting out. You hear a lot about how hard a transition is, how difficult it is to make that transition from the military to the private sector. And, I'd say don't spend too much time worried about that. Because once again, that's bandwidth focused on worrying. Life's about transition. It doesn't have to be leaving the military for the private sector. People in the private sector switch jobs. That's a transition. People get divorced. That's a transition. Horrible things happen in life. It doesn't happen just to people in the military. And you adapt and you move forward. So the transition, I wouldn't get too wrapped, around the axle about worrying about that transition. It's really about identifying that next mission in life. And really the second novel, I mean, it's a political thriller, but it's about transitions. It's about redemption. And I got to incorporate my experience with transitioning from the military to my protagonist, who was going through a life transition as well. So it's really about identifying that next mission in life, because you're not going to recreate what you had in the military. Like, that's just a given. I've seen that over and over again. People try to figure out how are they going to get a team environment like they had in the military on the outside. Then they're disappointed when that doesn't happen. Well, guess what? It's not going to happen. Yeah. It's a different deal. And of course, my experience is on a very thin slice of the military, which is special operations. So take everything I say with a grain of salt.
Sure.
But this
is your experience.
This is exactly. And I saw so many people that had a hard time with that. So when I got out, I made the decision to make a clean break. Because I saw so many people that just kind of couldn't leave that last life behind. Yeah. So I wanted to make a clean transition. So kind of a physical and a psychological break, with the military, a new chapter. I wanted to turn that page. So, we moved out of Coronado, California, where we finished up our time in the military, and my family, we moved to the mountains in Park City, Utah, to raise our kids in a ski town. And I think that was important, because we're not going to dropping the kids off at the same school where our friends who are still in the teams are dropping their kids off. You're not going to the same bars. You're not going to the same restaurants. You're not in the grocery store. It's just not a constant presence in your life all the time. So it's a building block. Like, it was something that you did. For me, I was a SEAL. I'm not a SEAL anymore. But it provides a certain foundation upon which to build. So that's what I'm doing. I'm moving forward in life. So I would say that focus forward. Don't look back too much, other than to build from that foundation. Take the good parts of it. So like Bruce Lee said, take what's useful, discard what's useless, and move forward. But identifying that next mission in life, that next passion in life, I think that's a vital importance as you move forward, transitioning from military service.